gentleman from Texas's comment about why don't we just wait till we understand all the facts of Uvalde with some more investigation underway. He acted as if we've had 2 shootings in America, 2 mass shootings, and we're coming to respond to that. We are responding to thousands and thousands and thousands of shootings in this country over the last decade. And so what have been developed here are developed in response to a gun violence epidemic. And the idea,
will the gentleman yield for 10
I will
seconds?
not yield. The idea that we should wait while we can have families that have lost loved ones who are expecting Congress to respond.
Time belongs
and the
to the
idea, as
gentleman from
Mr.
Rhode
Roy suggested,
Wait
that we
before
should just
commenting on
wait
something
to
you don't
find
know the
out.
facts about.
We should be we've waited too long already.
I'm
We
not talking about
failed
waiting
to
about the
respond to the
legislation.
cries
belongs
of
to the
people
gentleman
all
from
across
Rhode
this
Island.
country who have asked and demanded that Congress act. So no, we shouldn't wait. We shouldn't wait another second. We shouldn't wait another minute,
you don't
another
know what
day.
happened
We
in
should
Uvalde.
act now. The second thing
You don't
is
know
my
the
friend
facts.
and colleague from Colorado just made reference to this suite of bills as shallow and inconsequential. Shallow and inconsequential. I'm going to go through just a few pieces of this. Ghost guns were used in a shooting in Santa Clara, California that killed 3 people and injured 3 others. Ghost guns were used in November of 2017 in Rancho Tehama, California that injured 18 people. Another shooting in Santa Monica, California that killed 6. Bump stocks were used, as we all know, in Las Vegas that killed 60. Shootings that involved people under 21 years of age. Robb Elementary School, as we know, Uvalde, Texas. Tops Friendly Market, 10 were killed. 22 were killed in Uvalde. Santa Fe High School, 10 were killed. 13 were injured. Parkland, Florida, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, 17 were killed. 17 injured. Newtown, Sandy Hook Elementary School, 27 children were killed. In Columbine, 15 people were killed and 24 were injured. Those individuals would not have been able to buy the gun they bought if the bill that we're going to pass today were the law. Safe storage, the list goes on for pages. So to say inconsequential when it would have saved the lives of many, many people, and as Chairman Nadler said, even if it's 1 life. So to say it's inconsequential and then to say, let's talk about border security and abortion because all we want to do is avoid responsibility to act in the face of gun violence in this country. Shame on our colleagues. If you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to address it, don't come to the hearing. But honor the memories of those who we have lost to gun violence by taking this issue seriously and being committed to finding solutions. Do you think a grieving mother or father who's watching you wants to hear you talk about abortion and border security? We're trying to respond to gun violence that led to the death of their child. That's what this hearing is about. These families, and sadly there are thousands of families across this country who fall into this category, who have suffered unspeakable pain because Congress has failed to act, and our Republican colleagues in the Senate in particular, in blocking any progress in reducing gun violence in this country. We owe it to their memory. We owe it to the oath that we have taken to protect our constituents, our most solemn responsibility. And people talk about the Second Amendment. We've heard it again today. It's a constitutional amendment. You can't touch it. That is not true. The Supreme Court of the United States has told us that.
Will the gentleman yield?
The Supreme Court of the United States has made it clear that Congress has the authority to impose reasonable restrictions to protect the life and the safety and the security of those we serve. In the same way, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. There is no constitutional right that is absolute. It is balanced with responsibility.
Would the gentleman yield?
And so all these claims about, gee, we wish we could do something. We wish we could remove America from this terrible distinction of being a country that has a gun violence epidemic unlike any other country in the developed world. And by the way, if more guns were the answer, we'd live in the safest country in the world. There are more guns in America than people. Our country is awash in guns, and it has produced more and more and more death and more gun violence. So that's not the answer. We've tried it. It doesn't work. We need real solutions so we can go back to our districts and demonstrate to the people we serve we've taken some action that's going to make a difference and help protect lives in communities all across this country. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida, for what purposes? Gentleman from Florida seek recognition.
Strike last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
He said it right there. What they're upset about is the number of guns in the country. This isn't about, modest age restrictions that are unconstitutional. It's not about better record keeping. They want fewer guns. They think that the answer is fewer guns. And that is what is creating a lot of discomfort among our fellow Americans who cherish their guns and cherish their Second Amendment rights and have actually committed no crimes.
They cherish their children, Mr. Gaetz?
You know what? Their children aren't the ones at risk as a consequence of
All
law-abiding gun owners.
children in America are at risk.
That's what you get wrong. It's not law-abiding gun owners, David.
Were those children in Uvalde at risk?
Florida
Here's the tension. Here's the tension, okay? You guys are spasming into this reflexive response, and you call it an emergency hearing, right? And the basis for the emergency is what happened in Uvalde. And we all agree it was awful and but you are not providing the thoughtful solutions that would actually reduce the likelihood of that. When you make an argument in the Judiciary Committee for a change in the law, there are two components. You have to demonstrate a need for the change, and that what you're bringing forward will actually affect that in a positive way. And it's the second part of the argument where the bills you've presented today undeniably fail. And in Florida, I would suggest we had a process that's a little bit better than what we've observed here. In Florida, following Parkland, every Floridian wanted to reduce the likelihood that that could ever occur again for precisely the reasons that animate your passions today. But instead of rushing to town, stumbling bills together, we got our very best sheriffs, our very best police chiefs, former members of law enforcement, people with tactical experience, even parents of slain children. And we put them on a board to review a school shooting as if it were an airline crash, dispassionately, thoroughly. And then as a consequence, what we saw was actually a failure in law enforcement. That the sheriff in Broward County was so recalcitrant in not doing the training, that the on-the-ground law enforcement were so derelict in their duties that children died that didn't need to. And so Governor DeSantis rightly fired that sheriff, replaced them, put better training in, more money to harden our schools and our synagogues, our houses of worship across the state of Florida, and we're safer as a consequence. So it's not that we're particularly here to talk about abortion or the border. We understand we have to make these things less likely, but whether it's you holding an emergency hearing to respond to a leaked draft opinion that's not even final, or now when the Congressman Roy from Texas says, gosh, before you have the emergency Uvalde hearing, maybe we ought to figure out what happened in Uvalde so that we can make that frequency less likely to occur. I think there's also a balancing of interests here that the American people need to understand. You say if it saves one life, anything that saves one life is totally worth doing. And certainly every loss of life is tragic, and certainly every preventable loss of life is tragic. But Mr. Cohen gave up the game earlier when he said, we acknowledge on the front end of this hearing that there will be deprivations of liberty to law-abiding people, that we will at times stop law-abiding people from doing what is otherwise constitutionally legal. So while I certainly want every American to safely store their firearms, while I certainly want every American to be trained on the safe storage of firearms, I'm not entirely sure that the Congress of the United States is the appropriate entity to tell Americans how to store firearms and then punish them as a consequence. And if the result of all of this is there's a a life or two that we save, and the result is, like, how many tens of millions of Americans are you willing to deprive of their constitutionally guaranteed liberty in order to achieve that objective, when there might be a more narrowly constrained appropriate way for gun enthusiast groups, hunting clubs, local government, states, to try to educate and encourage proper safety of the storage of firearms. So again, we share your goal of making these shootings less likely, whether they be in our schools or elsewhere in our communities, but we don't think that in the name of saving one life, that fundamentally constraining the rights of all Americans is necessary, especially when we are still awaiting the results of the review of what happened in Uvalde that shocks the conscience of all of us. So please spare us the spirited screaming. We want to stop the violence. We just wish you would listen to some of the ideas that we think would help. And from my standpoint, if you hold schools out as gun-free zones, as soft targets, you make those school shootings more likely. And I don't think you want to do that. But I think that if we got rid of the gun-free zones and if we empowered people that could be helpful, we might see a reduction in violence.